and welcome to the second episode of This Is Actually Pretty Cool. My name is Jennifer, and as you may recall from the first episode, I am going to be researching and cooking my way through a really neat cookbook and memoir called In the Kitchen with Elinor Donahue. In today's episode, I'm going to be sharing just some facts about the book, just some basic facts, and then I'm going to move on to just some information from the introduction, and then the first story and the first recipe, which I'm both really excited about and also pretty apprehensive about. So we'll definitely see how that goes. Now, the book we're focusing on, In the Kitchen with Elinor Donahue, was published in 1998 by Cumberland House. Now, Cumberland House was an independent publisher. They were based in Nashville, Tennessee, so not too terribly far from where I'm located in Western North Carolina. Now, they were acquired by Source Books in 2008. I will say that this book does appear to be out of print. And like if you go to Amazon.com, the only sellers are third-party sellers. The cheapest price is $60. And I found on my book, just a little say like, oh, it's this much in the US and this much in Canada, just kind of on the book itself. I found that it was $16.95 when my mom bought it for me in 1999. Thanks again, Mom. And so I thought maybe the cost on Amazon was inflation at first, but I used an inflation calculator that $16.95 in 1999 would have been $31.95 today. So it is an 88% increase, but it is also not $60. And all the other sellers I found for it were sort of just third-party vendors. Definitely, I understand if $60 is not in your discretionary book fund. It's definitely not in mine, so I totally get it. You may be able to find it for cheaper just on different websites. You may be able to find it at your library. I don't know if there are reputable online sources where anyone has just done like PDF files or something like that, but definitely feel free to try that out. But yeah, it does seem to be it being out of print that is driving that cost, unfortunately. It does have a rating of 4.2 stars on Amazon and on Goodreads. It doesn't have a ton of reviews on Amazon, but they are good ones. I think the only bad one I saw was someone had not gotten the book, I assume from like the third-party vendor, and their review was basically like the book never arrived. So that review was, hey, I never got my book, which is a fair review, and not, I got the book and it was awful and I wanted to set it on fire. So again, 4.2 stars on Amazon and on Goodreads. So we do go ahead and we start, with the introduction of the book, just like with any normal book. And Miss Donahue tells us that she was born on April 19th, 1937. I thought it would be really neat to kind of just talk about what was going on in 1937, not like a real deep dive or anything, but just to see kind of what was happening in the world and in the US at that time, because if you're me, or if you're like me, you probably heard 1937 and go, whoa, that is close to World War II times, huh? And it is, it definitely is. And so in terms of global events, the Spanish Civil War was happening in Spain. That would go on to cause a dictatorship in Spain for several decades. And speaking of dictatorships, in Germany, a failed artist and just absolute psychopath, an awful person named Adolf Hitler was the Chancellor of Germany. And so, of course, that would go on to impact the whole world, really, in very soon from Miss Donahue being born. Now, in the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was actually just starting his second term as president. He had been inaugurated in January of 1937, and on February 4th, Walt Disney's film Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs premiered in theaters. And this was actually the first full-length animated film to be shown in theaters. And of course, that would also make Snow White the very first Disney princess. So I thought that was really cool. So, Miss Donahue was actually born Mary Elinor Donahue. She would go on to change her name as a teenager, and that does come up in the book, and obviously we'll touch on that when it happens. Her parents were actually in their 40s when she was born, which I know today isn't as big of a deal. Like, I'm 42, and if I had a kid, would be like, oh, okay, yeah, people were just having kids, later and later. But back in 1937, it was just unusual. You were just kind of like considered kind of done with kids and child rearing by your 40s. She has a brother and sister who were 21 and 18 and a half when she was born. I always find that gap, age gap in siblings, like that extreme age gap, I always find that really fascinating, because it's like, oh, okay, well, you're the youngest, but then also you're kind of like the only child, because you're not really competing with your brother and sister for like toys or, affection or things like that. She was put into dance classes at 18 months old, just to burn off some energy, which I think is a goal that all parents have for their children. So if you haven't done it, dance class seems to be something that works. And her brother and sister, like I said, they were older when she was born. Her brother was a musician and her sister was a dancer. So it really does seem that artistic or that performing gene does run in the family. And so I don't know if I mentioned this before, but the premise of this book is that Elinor Donahue collects recipes. It's a hobby she has. She talks about this in the introduction. That's a hobby she's had for a long time. She talks about how her mom never really used a recipe, and in the beginning, Elinor Donahue tried to, freestyle it too, and then she's like, oh wait, no, I'm not good at that. And so she, at that point, just started collecting recipes, and it's been a lifelong hobby for her. And so the premise of this book is, okay, I'm going to tell some stories about my life. And then also I have these recipes that, that are my own recipes, or I got them from family or from friends, including, friends that I worked with in Hollywood, different celebrities and things like that. And she does talk about her love of food. She says that her first word that she ever read was a sign from a donut shop. So literally just reading the word donut. Donuts are objectively amazing, and I really feel like Elinor Donahue and I would get along in terms of food. Speaking of food, we are going to go ahead and move into the first recipe. This is one from her sister. Her sister's name is Gwen, and her brother's name is Gerald. And her sister actually contributed this recipe. I love how collaborative this book is. I love, she talks about in the introduction of like, everyone was like super eager to contribute recipes. And, I just really love that. I love that teamwork makes the dream work. But this recipe from her sister is called Sweet and Sour Ribs. She has a little poem at the beginning of it that I would assume her sister wrote for her when she gave her the recipe. And it says, to the artist formerly known as Princess, this is a very simple recipe, but delicious. And that's because Elinor Donahue's character that she played in Father Knows Best, Betty Anderson, the nickname on the show for that character was Princess. So that's why the poem is there. And I just thought it was super cute and just wanted to call that out as well. So at this point, I'm going to move on to making some sweet and sour ribs. All right, so for our recipe for sweet and sour ribs, you're going to start off with 4 pounds of pork spare ribs. You're going to go ahead and put those in a large pot and then take salted water, pour that in the pot. You want enough water to cover the ribs, and so you will need a fairly large pot for that. And then You're going to go ahead and just cook covered on the stove for 30 minutes. I cooked it on low. And then while you are doing that, you can go ahead and make your sauce for the ribs. So this is going to be your sweet and sour sauce. So it's 4 tablespoons of ketchup. We just happen to have Heinz in the house. And then half a cup of water, half a cup of white vinegar, and then 3 to 4 drops of hot sauce. Now, I was really brave, y'all. I used 4 whole drops of it, so we will definitely see how that goes. Once your ribs are done on the stove, you can go ahead and pour that sauce over it. You can kind of see I have like a little bit of the ketchup stuff that didn't quite get mixed up, but the rest of it did. And so then what you're going to do is go ahead and put this in the oven at 350 degrees and bake for 1 hour. All right, so the ribs are done baking, and so we're just going to let them cool for a little bit because I don't want to burn my tongue, and then we will be trying these out. All right, so it is cool enough to eat, so we're going to go ahead and try it. I've got just like a little spare rib here. I'm just going to take a little bite because I don't want to like just be chewing for like a minute or so. So yeah, let's go ahead and try this. This is really good. The book said like, oh, hey, it needs to be really sticky. And I thought it would be more of a glaze, but it is entirely possible that I also did something wrong. So for example, water appeared twice in the recipe, and one was obviously for like cooking it on the stove, like boiling it. And then I assumed the other water was for the mix, and it could have been like this could be how it's supposed to be. There's no I was about to say there are no pictures in the book, but that's not true. There are no recipe pictures in the book, right? So, you know, I kind of have to guess how things are supposed to look. And I mean, like, it's ribs, you know, they're not going to come out looking like donuts. But yeah, so this is really good. I'm really excited. I've actually got some sweet potatoes steaming in the microwave right now. So I'm going to have some ribs and some sweet potatoes. And, you know, I'm trying to figure out a way to kind of rate these recipes. And just to be clear, it's my rating based on like what I like. So someone else could be like, oh yeah, I don't think I'd like that very much. Or they could be like, oh, you didn't really give it an enthusiastic rating, but I think it would be actually really cool and something I'd really enjoy. So again, this is completely subjective. And so one of the ratings is, would I make this for myself again? And yeah, definitely. I got a good price on the spare ribs at Aldi, so it wasn't too bad price-wise. It makes a lot, so I can have leftovers, which I'm totally cool with leftovers. We grew up on them, so love a recipe that makes a lot. And so yeah, I would definitely say that I would make this for myself again. Would I make this for someone else? Yeah, I think so. I mean, if they're wanting it to be like super glazy and everything, then, you know, that may not fit the bill here, but if they're just kind of wanting that subtle hint of flavor and some really, really super tender rib meat, then yeah, absolutely. I would make this, you know, for my parents when they come into town, or, you know, anyone else who's coming in that, you know, eats meat and eats pork. So yeah, so I would go ahead and call this recipe absolute banger. I think we're starting off really strong with this one, and I am very much looking forward to seeing where else we go with the recipes. And with that, that is the end of the second episode of This Is Actually Pretty Cool. So if you enjoyed this, you can feel free to like the page on YouTube. I believe there's like a subscription option. If that's available to you, definitely feel free to do that. And I will see y'all in a few days for our next recap and our next recipe. Thanks so much. Y'all have a great night. Bye.